The night I worked as an overnight direct care aide for Martha is a night I never went back to. I'd done this kind of work before. I'd been a direct care worker for 2 other adults with developmental disabilities, but nothing prepared me for how wrong this one night would feel. Her daughter, Colleen, who hired me, was in her 40s and worked nights. Maybe she had no family nearby, maybe she couldn't afford a facility, or maybe she just wanted someone with medical experience nearby. Whatever the reason, she introduced me to Martha that evening and gave me the rundown. Martha sometimes wandered at night and could get confused. I might need to calm her and return her to bed. This behavior was part of her dementia and not sleepwalking. Colleen told me to call her if anything serious happened. She left around 9 p.m. Martha smiled at me when Colleen walked her up the stairs, the kind of smile that's polite and unfocused all at once. I settled into the living room to watch a show, which is usually how these overnight shifts go. A lot of sitting and waiting. About an hour in, I heard footsteps above. I went to the foot of the stairs and called out, but there was no reply. The steps retreated upstairs and the bedroom door clicked shut. Maybe she'd gone to the bathroom, I thought, and went back to the couch. Later, carrying a plate with the sandwich I'd packed, I nearly dropped everything. Martha was standing in the kitchen doorway, and the living room light reflected off dozens of tiny shards of glass scattered on the floor. Her presence made the air feel colder. She screamed, not the thin, frightened kind of cry, but a raw, confused bellow. "Who are you?" she demanded, folding her frailty into something sharp. Calm and practiced, I told her my name and reminded her that Colleen had hired me to watch the house. For a moment it was enough. She allowed me to guide her back upstairs. I got her a glass of water and, because Colleen had mentioned sleep trouble, some melatonin. She took them both. I slept in a spare bedroom upstairs. Colleen had insisted I use it if I needed to rest, and after an exhausting double shift earlier that day, I allowed myself to fall into a shallow sleep. An hour later, a rhythmic banging jolted me awake. It was steady, a slam every second or two, and it came from downstairs. I left the bedroom door open and crept toward the stairs. In the kitchen, the darkness swallowed everything but a silhouette. Martha stood before the oven, opening and slamming the door again and again. Her movements were mechanical. When I called her name, she turned, closed the oven one last time, and started walking toward me. Up close, the blankness in her face was worse than the yelling had been. It was like looking at someone whose batteries had been taken out. She passed me and went back up the stairs as if she belonged in that house more than I did. When she slammed the bedroom door and turned away from me, I eased it open and found her standing at the side of the bed, facing the wall. The image, a thin woman folded into herself, staring at plaster like it contained a meaning only she could see, lodged in my chest. I helped her into bed gently, covered her, said goodnight, and tried to sleep again, deliberately staying half awake for at least 30 minutes. I don't remember if I succeeded. Later, or maybe much later. The night was thick, and my sense of time had gone wrong. Something in the spare room made me bolt upright. The closet door was cracked open, and a darkness like a second shadow peeked back at me. I called for Martha. Ahead, hers pushed the door wider, and she emerged slowly, like a person dragged out of sleep. Her voice was back to that same terrified chant. "Who are you?" "I don't know you." I fumbled for the lamp, hands clumsy, and flicked it on. In the lamplight, she stood in the doorway holding a chef's knife that must have been almost as long as my forearm. Time did the thing it does when you're watching a train wreck in slow motion. It stretched out and focused on the smallest, most dangerous details. The blade caught the light. She advanced 2 steps, then stopped, as if listening to a thought none of us could hear. I screamed for her to put the knife down. She screamed back. Her wrist jerked and the blade flashed in a slow, weak strike through the air. This wasn't in the job description. I didn't come to be a bodyguard for a delirious person with a blade. I plotted my exit. 1 wide circle around the bed, out the opposite door. I moved fast, as quietly as I could, and as luck would have it, I made it. I ran down the stairs, grabbed my shoes, and went outside into the cool night without calling the police. I called Colleen because she'd asked me to call her if anything happened. She was panicked and angry on the phone. Not at me at first, but that changed when I told her what had happened. She told me not to leave and begged me to stay put until she came home. I waited on the porch and watched the house through, the black silhouette of the yard. When Colleen returned, Martha was asleep in her bed again. Colleen refused to believe me at first, accusing me of exaggerating, until she found the knife on the floor near Martha's bed. I didn't tell Colleen that I'd fallen asleep at all that night. I didn't want to be blamed for anything. I left and never worked for them again. In 9 years of caregiving, Martha was the most dangerous person I ever met, not because she wanted to be, but because the disease made her unpredictable and I was the one small person in her path. My first day as a plumber's helper is another job I remember for how wrong it looked from the start. The company was small, 5 employees, and the owner assigned jobs from a binder. For some reason, I was dispatched to a house out of town, a leaky pipe under a sink. Simple, common, the kind of call every rookie gets so they can learn the basics. The house looked abandoned from the curb, paint peeled from the porch, and the lawn was a brown tumble of dead grass. I knocked until a middle-aged man with a grin so wide it didn't fit his face answered. The smile wasn't friendly. It was the kind that makes your skin go tight. He moved like someone who'd rehearsed pleasantness. Inside, there was nothing but an echo. No furniture, just a few blankets on the floor, and the smell of stale air and dust. I slid under the sink, checked the pet trap and the lock nuts, and discovered there was no water coming out of the faucet. When I asked him about it, he said, with a little giggle, that he must have turned the main valve off. He walked away, saying he'd be right back. Then he did something weird. He walked upstairs. I heard multiple footsteps, faster then slower, as if more than one person had made those steps. The house's layout didn't fit that action. Valves aren't upstairs. The sound of footsteps accelerated in my head. My gut tightened to a knot. The man had been standing over me at the sink, legs on either side like a human gait. He'd moved closer than necessary. Even when he stepped away, he left something else behind, a wrongness in the air. I pulled my tools out, gave that house a long look, and decided to leave. Something about that set of circumstances. The odd phone number the company had for the booking a VIP line with no real trace, and the way the man watched me from upstairs told me fast that this wasn't a simple leak. I loaded my van and drove away, kept driving until the house was a dot in the rear view. I called our boss and said it was a prank because telling the truth would have sounded like cowardice. Later, I filed a report with local police to make them aware of the vacant house. I never went back to that part of town. And then there was Domino's. In 2019, I took a job delivering pizzas because I needed money for college supplies. The first night was training. The manager rode with us while we made our initial deliveries. It was late, and the order came through. 4 large pizzas and 2 bottles of soda. Headed to a house out in the middle of nowhere. The kind of place that sits in a pocket of land where cell phones. The house was an ancient 2-story that had been left to rot. Boarded windows, splintered wood, and a skirting of brush made it look like it swallowed sunlight. My manager led, my fellow trainee and I followed, and when we approached the door, the other trainee whispered that he thought someone was watching from an upstairs window. The manager shrugged it off. He pounded the door hard enough to make his knuckles sting. The door cracked open and a face withered at the edges peered out, then pulled the door open fully. An older man who said he needed time to get the money. The smell that hit us when we looked in was rank and animal. The house felt like it had been occupied for survival, not living. Blank floors, scattered blankets. As the man went to get money, footsteps came from upstairs. Not light patrols, but quick, multiple steps. It felt like someone was moving in a hurry to observe us. Then we heard another set of footsteps coming from below us, behind our feet. The noise made my breath small and thin. My manager said he would check the back of the house. He walked away, and a few seconds later, we heard him scream and begin running toward the front. He yelled for us to get in the car and leave. When the engine roared to life, wheels biting into gravel, he explained in ragged puffs that he'd come upon a ring of men around a small, makeshift fire in the backyard. In the center was a baby deer, trembling and small. The men sat and laughed, passing around something they found funny in its helplessness. The image of them laughing, the low, cruel mirth, made the hair on my arms stand up. We didn't stop working just because we were scared. My co-worker and I quit that night. The manager lasted 1 more month and then left to... We had stumbled into something that felt like a primitive, dangerous tribe, and the delivery route was never the same after that. I never worked a delivery job again. Those 3 nights are different in detail, but the same in effect. Every job that required me to walk into someone else's space had the chance to become something else entirely. People say weird things happen in old houses or at strange hours. But what sticks with me is how ordinary it all looked right before it tipped into the wrong. A smile that's too wide, a voice that's a little too quiet, a closet left ajar, a ring of men huddled around a tiny fire. I tell these stories because they taught me to trust my first instincts. Each time something felt off, it usually was. And when your instincts tell you to leave, go. You can't argue with that kind of knowledge.